Hello, everybody. So for your assignment today, you were supposed to answer some questions about this reading, and so this is just a read-along version. You don't have to listen to this if you don't want to, but I am going to supply it. So this is an article called The Expanding American Republic and the War of 1812. We are getting started on the War of 1812, and this is kind of like a supplemental reading for that. So the United States underwent dramatic changes during the beginning of the 19th century. The U.S. began to expand as settlers moved into new territory west of the Appalachian Mountains. At the same time, renewed conflict with American Indian nations and Great Britain both posed a challenge to the fragile new republic. All three of these factors played a role in the coming of the War of 1812. The Louisiana Purchase of 1803 added a huge piece of new territory to the United States. This intensified American migration to the West, which was already well underway. American settlement in the 18th century had mostly happened along the East Coast. As a result, the main population centers of early North America were found on the coast and along major rivers. By 1790, the fast-growing population in the United States had reached 3.9 million, but only 5% of Americans lived west of the Appalachian Mountains, which run from Maine to Georgia. By 1820, however, the total U.S. population had reached 9.6 million and 25% of Americans lived west of the Appalachians. This period of American settlement in the new territory was known as Western expansion. Rapid population growth and geographic expansion caused a great deal of conflict. Native Americans in the West resisted American expansion and fought renewed wars in the early 19th century. In addition, plantation slavery was expanded beyond the coastal areas of the Southeast. This meant that huge numbers of slaves were forcibly moved to new territories. But the majority of white Americans saw Western expansion as a major opportunity. It promised independence and success to anyone willing to meet the hardships of frontier life. The War of 1812 served as a turning point in the history of the U.S. The United States served a second war with its former colonial ruler, Great Britain. In the process, it called forth a national effort that helped Americans from different regions pull closer together. While Western movements was reshaping the U.S., European wars also presented a major challenge to the new country. The Napoleonic Wars were a continuation of the conflict begun in the 1790s when Great Britain fought against France during its revolution. Now, however, France was led by brilliant military strategist Napoleon Bonaparte. Neither European superpower respected the neutrality of the United States. Instead, both tried to prevent U.S. ships from carrying goods to their enemy. Most historians now agree that the War of 1812 was a Western war with Eastern labels. In other words, the real causes of the war came from the desire for control of Western Native American lands and clear access to trade through New Orleans. The United States entered the war hesitantly. There was strong opposition from the Federalists in New England who wanted friendly relations with Great Britain. When Congress declared war in June 1812, votes were heavily divided. In the War of 1812, the United States once again fought against British and their Native American allies. For this reason, some historians see the conflict as a second war for American independence. The 3-year war marks a traditional boundary between two periods in the early history of the United States. The first period had strong ties to the more colonial world of the 18th century. The second period after the war was marked by developments that contributed to a more independent American society and culture. During the war, the British launched a failed attack on Fort McHenry in Baltimore Harbor. After witnessing the attack, Francis Scott Key wrote a poem later called the Star-Spangled Banner. It became the official national anthem of the United States in 1931. Although the War of 1812 served as an important turning point in the development of an independent United States, the war itself was mostly a political and military disaster for the country. The cost of the war was enormous, and New England talked of leaving the Union. American military opposition was so weak that the British stormed into Washington, D.C. after winning the Battle of Bladensburg and burned most of the public buildings, including the White House. President James Madison had to flee the city. His wife, Dolly, gathered valuable national objects and escaped with them at the last minute. It was the low point of the war. The War of 1812 came to an end mainly because the British public had grown tired of their 20-year war against France. Now that France was almost defeated, the minor war against the United States lost popular support in England. On December 24, 1814, the Treaty of Ghent was signed in Belgium, bringing the war to a close. The treaty called for British and American territory to be restored to its boundaries before the war. At the start of the 19th century, much of North America had yet to become a part of the United States. After the War of 1812, the United States began to develop in a more distinctly American fashion. The years of the early republic had been a period of enormous change that included dramatic political developments as well as the surge of Western settlement. America was growing up. And so these questions are actually the questions that are on your exit ticket. And so if you go through these questions, you'll see that it is the exit ticket. And so the first one asks, which of the following statements would Great Britain have been most likely to agree with prior to the War of 1812? The United States should not allow settlers to move west because it is upsetting Native Americans who live there. The United States should allow slavery in the West to help settlers develop the new territories. The United States should not trade with France if it is going to trade with Great Britain. The United States should give its western territories to Great Britain to make up for the Revolutionary War. Number 2, which of the following events most influenced westward expansion in the United States? The Louisiana Purchase, the Napoleonic Wars, the invasion of Washington, D.C., or the high cost of war of 1812? How does the map relate to the idea of the article? It shows areas in the western United States where major battles were fought during the War of 1812. It emphasizes the fact that overpopulation of the eastern states led to westward expansion. It depicts large portions of the land in the western United States where Native Americans lived. It illustrates the vast amounts of land that existed to the west of the United States. And number 4, look at the picture near the bottom of the article. Which statement best explains why this picture was included in this article? To show the United States was triumphant about its defeat of Great Britain in the War of 1812. To show the United States and Great Britain ended the War of 1812 on friendly terms. To show Great Britain was unwilling to meet the terms of the treaty that ended the War of 1812. Or to show that Great Britain wanted to negotiate for additional territory at the end of 1812. And so that's your exit ticket, really. You don't have to turn this in like we normally would. I just wanted to go ahead and set it up as an exit ticket for today. And so make sure that you read the document and then answer those questions through the form of the exit ticket today.